Raptor Management Coordinator for the Terrestrial Wildlife Branch of the Arizona Game and Fish Department. Tuck is one of those rare Arizona natives, born in Havasu and raised in Yuma. He graduated from the University of Arizona with a BS in Wildlife and Fisheries Science in 1999. Even before earning his degree, he was already deeply involved with wildlife research, holding internships with Arizona Game and Fish, working on fisheries in the White Mountains, and studying the endangered Mount Graham red squirrel. As a volunteer, Tuck contributed to a wide range of Arizona Game and Fish Department projects, including habitat assessments, small mammal trapping, electro-shocking surveys, hunter checkpoints, and deer drives. After graduation, he followed his passion for raptor conservation across the country, taking on short-term positions that allowed him to assist with studies of the Hawaiian hawk on the Big Island of Hawaii, bald eagles along the Hudson River in New York, migrating raptors in the Manzano Mountains of New Mexico, and red-tailed hawks in the lush Junque rainforest in Puerto Rico. In February 2002, Tuck returned to Arizona to join the Arizona Game and Fish Department's Bald Eagle Management Program. Over the past 2 decades, he has played a pivotal role in expanding the department's conservation efforts from a single species focus on bald eagles to a robust statewide raptor management program. Today, he serves as Raptor Management Coordinator, guiding research, management, and conservation of Arizona's diverse and remarkable birds of prey. And on a personal note, I can tell you that I had the unique opportunity to work with Tuck for 3 years as a field biologist with the Bald Eagle Nest Watch program on tribal lands in the desert and also on the Mogollon Rim. I can tell you that not only is Tuck the foremost expert and voice on this topic in the Southwest, he is also genuinely kind, steady, and one of the best bosses I have ever had. And this man can really, really climb trees. Please help me welcome Tuck Jacobson.
Well, thank you for that. Well, thank you. I'm happy you are all here. She said it was going to be a great presentation, so hopefully I can live up to that. Just so you know, I do go by Tuck. If you knew my weird family, and my family, Tuck is short for Kenneth. So the Bald Eagle Management Project, that's what I'm going to start talking about here. I'll go through quite a bit about our Bald Eagle program. It's a long-lasting program in the state, but it's not just me that makes this program work. I've got my Eagle Field Projects Coordinator, Kyle McCarty, who's been with the program for over 15 years now. Jen Pressler spends half her time with the Eagle program in the spring, so she's been with us for 7 or 8 years at this point. And then every year we also hire on a crew of nest watchers that are our eyes and ears out in the field. Without them, we wouldn't be able to accomplish most of what we do also. And then we also have biologists throughout the state in our 6 different regions that help us out. So it's really a communal effort that makes everything that we do possible. So I'm going to jump right in here, and we've got a brief history of bald eagle management here in Arizona specifically. But in 1971, that's really when the nationwide concern for bald eagles became apparent. That's following the alert that Rachel Carson's Silent Spring brought forth. They realized these were really affecting bald eagles and their reproductive success. At that point in Arizona, we only knew of 3 bald eagles breeding areas in the state, so we didn't really know a whole lot about bald eagles at the time. But that's when annual monitoring of productivity and occupancy of every known eagle nest in Arizona began. It's 1971. By 1978, the bald eagles were listed as endangered in Arizona as well as throughout the contiguous U.S., threatened in 5 states, and then Alaska has always had so many bald eagles it was never listed there, and Hawaii, bald eagles don't exist, so not listed in that state. By 1984, we had found enough bald eagles spanning a lot of different jurisdictional boundaries, and the Southwestern Bald Eagle Management Committee was formed. That's still active today. And then with the passage of the Heritage Fund in 1991, the Arizona Game and Fish Department had the funding and staffing available to take on the lead role in bald eagle management in Arizona. And then by 1995, bald eagles were downlisted to threatened status throughout the contiguous U.S., and then fully delisted in 2007. Also in 2007, that's when the Game and Fish Department finalized our conservation assessment and strategy for the bald eagle in Arizona. With the real main focus there is for this strategy to guide bald eagle management in Arizona in a post-delisting realm. And of course, delisting followed by a decade of litigation over whether or not that was the right status here in the state. There was a good decade of litigation, and that was all tied to bald eagles here in Arizona and whether or not they were a distinct population segment, and did they deserve still continued ESA listing status. The department and our take on all of that was, we're the one doing the conservation on the ground. Whatever they end up doing in the courts, we're just gonna keep doing what we do. So, a little bit of the population history. I told you we only knew of 3. The first territory, the first written documentation of bald eagles in Arizona was Alexander Burns reported a nest there at Stoneman Lake in 1890. I say written documentation because the tribal communities have verbal documentation and stories going way back before this. But and then after that, as far as nesting in the desert here in Arizona, those were identified in the 1930s. There at Saguaro and Bartlett Lake. Those were largely found because they were looking to build dams to create those lakes, and found out they had bald eagles to address in those areas. Some of those nest sites are still, actually, both of those nest sites still have pairs outing today. Not the same pairs. So, if you look at the history of when we were doing the full census in Arizona statewide, back to 1971 with 3 breeding areas, you can tell there weren't a whole lot. As they started looking for them more and more, they found more. By the time they were listed as endangered in 1978, we do have 10 breeding areas across Arizona. So still, not a whole lot of them. Once they were listed, there was several years that they took to create a recovery plan for these, and then real intensive surveys across bald eagle habitat began there in the 1980s through early 90s. So a lot of that increase that you're seeing in that period, that's just us finding breeding areas that were already in existence. That's not growth of the population. By the 1990s, we've been surveying these areas year after year, and a lot of that you see from the 1990s through today is actual growth, where it's sections of river that we've been surveying, and then we find a new pair moved in, a new nest being built, and so forth. So a lot of what you see from the 90s on is actual population growth. You can see it was delisted or downlisted to threatened in 1995, and then completely delisted in 2007. There was a lot of concern that without those ESA protections, we wouldn't be able to keep the trajectory of our relatively small and isolated population here in Arizona. But at this point, you can see we have doubled in population size since then. Here's a look at the distribution of our bald eagle breeding areas across the state. That 111 is the total number of breeding areas that we monitored in 2025, so this last season. So it continues to grow. The great majority of these are along the Salt and Verde rivers, and then now, in the last decade, we've really filled in a lot of those high elevation mountain lakes. Your typical breeding habitat for bald eagles here in Arizona is, across most of its range, it's trees, pine trees, cottonwood trees. But here in Arizona, it's a bit unique where a lot of our habitat is desert and trees are limited. So bald eagles here in Arizona do nest on cliffs and pinnacles, which typically you don't see except for on the Aleutian Islands and island-type habitats. We also have a handful of nests on artificial structures that we put up, largely because we've had pairs in areas where fires have come through and killed all the trees. They lost their nesting trees, so if we're able to put up an artificial structure in there, we're able to provide a spot for them to nest while we wait for the natural trees to regenerate and come to the size that's useful for bald eagles. Also, as the bald eagle population has grown, the habitats that they have moved into have changed a bit. So we've got eagle nests in weird places that keep my job interesting. We had a nest here several years on this crane, right in the middle of an active CMEX facility. The one here on the top left is they were nesting in that line of trees. One side of the nest tree is residential areas, like people are barbecuing, their dogs are running around, and then the other side is an excavation site with a big pit. And yeah, amazingly, the eagles that are nesting in these types of places, golf courses right by the tees, they moved into the area with all this activity already going on and decided, okay, we can make this happen. These eagles are tolerant of people on the ground. The ones out in the middle of nowhere, those eagles react completely different than our urban eagles. So we had to adjust our management strategies a bit to handle that. A little bit of their breeding chronology. Here in Arizona, bald eagles nest a little earlier than they do in the rest of the U.S. That is largely due to latitude. Bald eagles in Florida actually nest a little earlier than bald eagles in Arizona, and then the further north you go, the later that they'll nest. But here in Arizona, courtship is now through January, and then there'll be nest building, that sort of thing, and then they'll actually lay eggs usually sometime between December and March. Can be quite a span. Some of the higher elevation sites start in the later part, but the urban sites and desert locations usually have eggs in December or January. Once those eggs are laid, the male and female takes turns incubating, and they'll have those eggs protected 24/7. It's a real important time that the bald eagles are on the nest 24/7 with only short breaks while the adults are switching out duties. But it takes 35 days for those eggs to hatch. Once those eggs hatch, they'll go from egg size to full grown, actually slightly larger than the adults, in just 12 weeks and be ready to fly. So I say they're slightly larger. The juveniles, their wings, feathers, and tail feathers are actually a little longer and a little wider than they will have as an adult. That's largely, it gives them that just little bit extra loft. It's training wheels to help them learn to fly. And then they will stay in that nesting area for about 45 days on average, learning how to find food, forage, how to hopefully stay out of trouble from the adults. But at 45 days, they're ready to be on their own, and they just take flight and fly up north for the rest of the summer, and then usually come back to Arizona that following fall and winter. So that's a little bit of history of the population in Arizona and some bald eagle biology. I'm gonna talk now about some of the main parts of our job and the Game and Fish's job in managing bald eagles. So these are the items that I'm gonna focus on largely today. I wouldn't be able to do any of what we were able to do without the Southwestern Bald Eagle Management Committee. It's 29 state, federal, tribal, and private organizations. We get together twice a year to coordinate bald eagle management, as well as to fund all the projects that we're doing, all the flight time that we have, fund the Nest Watch program, and keep everyone on the same page. That way, whether it's tribal land or private land or federal land, we're all on the same page on how we're going to handle bald eagle management across those jurisdictions. And with the help of this diverse group, we've got resources that Game and Fish wouldn't have available otherwise. So this partnership is near and dear to my heart because these guys are what makes it possible. So, with that said, Nest Watch program. These guys are largely paid for by the members of the management committee. I have to update agreements and grants with them every year. They're not free. They're probably one of the most expensive parts of my budget, that and helicopter time. But we pay currently Nest Watchers $140 a day. They go out in teams of 2, and they monitor on a 10-day on, 4-day off schedule. Their days off are always Monday through Thursday, so they're there every Friday, Saturday, Sunday when recreation's the highest. And we station them at not the remotest places in the middle of nowhere. We station them at those sites where we've got a lot of human activity in the area. The nest site may be easily accessible. Sites where little outreach and education is needed in order to make sure that recreation and the nesting can coexist successfully. So the program itself, they show up early February, late January, and they've got 2 days of listening to me and my crew tell them about everything bald eagles possible, so that when they're out there and people ask them questions, hopefully they've got a good idea of how to answer it. And they have an idea of what they're collecting, what are the protocols, and so forth. But it's 2 days of intense training, and then on day 3 we throw them out in the middle of the desert and tell them good luck. So, but yeah, they're out there monitoring, and they're given 3 goals of this, and that's education, data collection, and conservation. I am sure Maria could have told you what those goals were before I switched that slide. That's hammered into them. Education's a big part of it. You've got people that are recreating out there. They're out there to fish or hike or do whatever. Oftentimes they have no idea that there's an eagle nesting right there and that they're causing a problem. So just talking to folks, showing them the eagle's behavior, explaining how it's a problem, and getting them to move back out of the nesting area is usually all you need. This boat here boated in and got into a slightly shady spot to sit down and anchor and eat lunch and do some fishing, and he had no idea that he was right under an eagle's nest there, and flushed the adult off of it as she was trying to feed her recently hatched young. So those instances, Nest Watchers are able to educate the folks, and they move out of the way to where the adults aren't having reactions, and we prevent failures that way. Other cases, you've got people that are a little bit more nefarious that you handle. These guys were up on the cliff inside of a closure, throwing rocks down into an eagle nest. Luckily, the eagles were nesting upstream, so it wasn't an active nest, but rocks in an eagle nest is not good, as those rocks will contribute to breakage of eggs in future years if they use them. But having Nest Watchers out there, they can call the authorities, and we can get law enforcement out there to address people in situations like this. But the great majority of time, recreation's going on, a lot of time the public have no idea the eagle's there, and the nest watchers are collecting data on what's going on, so that we know what type of recreational activities are causing potential issues with nesting attempts and what activities are perfectly fine. In this scenario, these raptors, they have no idea they've got an eagle nest right above them as they're paddling through. And the eagles don't react to that at all. They're perfectly fine with those paddlers going through on this river system. That big sandbar that you in the upper left of that picture, if those paddlers came in and decided to camp there overnight or stop for lunch, that's when these eagles would flush off the nest and leave their eggs, leave their young vulnerable. And so these sections of the river have pass-through only, no stopping sections. That comes from the nest watchers' data, observing these birds and telling us where the problems are. Their data tells us when we need closures, whether it's land closure or water closure. A lot of that, if you ran into bald eagle closures in the state, they're all a little different. And they're all a little different because they're based on that particular breeding area, the responses of those birds, and as well as what will effectively keep folks out of this area. Where's the pinch points that can be enforced? And it's really hard to get the eagles to stay in those closures. The other part of the data collection the nest watchers are invaluable for is aerial stuff, but as well as when things are changing. 20 years ago, we didn't have motorized parachutes flying around the landscape. Now it's a pretty common thing. And so knowing how eagles are reacting to that gives us a chance to reach the motorized paraglider community. Drones are a big one these days, and educating folks not to fly drones over eagle nests and into closures. But having nest watchers out there tells us when things are changing and tells us when we need to find new solutions as a group. A lot of those aerial flights, we're able to work with the FAA. In Arizona, we've got flight advisories over all of the waterways that have bald eagle nesting sites in the state. They're printed on the Phoenix aeronautical charts for the state of Arizona. We also have brochures that we put in pilot lounges across the state. Ultimately, the goal of the data collection and the management it spurs on is to prevent this from happening. We want to let the bald eagles have a chance to successfully nest, and we want to limit the amount of times that adults are getting flushed off the nest. That's what a bald eagle looks like when they're not happy with activity going on and they're flushed off the nest. We were going in for a banding, so that's how I got that picture. And he was mad at us. And then the last part was conservation. This is direct conservation, having nest watchers out there on a daily basis, watching these birds, watching the adults. They're able to tell when something's wrong. They'll call and something's just not quite right. Or it may be very apparent. And so they're able to call us. We're able to get our eagle rescue team out and address these situations. The great majority of the time, when the bald eagle nestlings are about ready to fledge, they flap and they hover. They often face into the wind. Well, if a big gust comes all at the same time, they end up on the ground a few days to a week before they're able to fly. And so we're able to go out there and put them back into the nest and give them those couple of days that they need. But you can see there's a whole variety of things that we deal with, and each rescue is a little bit different. But in the end, through having those eyes on the ground, we've had over 100 bald eagles, not only rescued, but returned to the wild, and given that successful second chance at life. So, the Eagle Rescue Team. As I mentioned, there's many different situations that we run into, whether it's fishing line or parasites, intruding adult bald eagles or golden eagles that have attacked the young and knocked them out of the nest. We've had windstorms where the entire nest has fallen on the ground, so we've got nestlings with no nest to put them in. So we'll build a new nest platform and then get them back up into that nest. And then whenever there is an eagle mortality reported, we respond to all of those, identify the mortality cause if possible, develop management to address those whenever possible. But typically, the birds flop out of the nest, hit the ground, and are perfectly fine. And we can get them back into the nest and wish them a long and prosperous life. There is a situations where they fall from the nest and they've got injuries. Whether it's a broken leg, a broken arm, broken bone somewhere. Maybe they're just severely dehydrated and they jump from the nest because they're trying to get to water. We can take them to Liberty Wildlife. They've been a partner of ours for decades, and they do a wonderful job with rehab on these birds. They'll get them back to hopefully releasable status, and we'll put them back into the nest they came from if we can. If not, we're able to foster them into other nests. Bald eagles don't count, so we can foster them into that alternate nest, and they just feed them like it's one of theirs. It works great. It makes my job easier when that's an option. There are times where it's eggs that we have to rescue. Those we'll bring to Liberty. They'll incubate them. They'll raise them in an imprint-free environment until they're about 4 to 6 weeks of age, and then we'll take them and put them into a nest as we're doing bandings of other nestlings of the same age. All right, I'm gonna transition over to the occupancy and reproductive assessment. These are surveys that we do statewide. We cover every bald eagle breeding area known in the state, 111 of them as of last year. Our job's harder than it was back in the 70s when there was 10. But every known breeding area we visit multiple times throughout the year. All of our historic breeding areas, we'll visit those every year. Those are sites that we used to have a pair but has not had breeding activity within the last 10 years. And then we're also searching habitat, looking for new nests, monitoring osprey nests. So any potential nest that we know is on the landscape, we'll keep an eye on those. And then we'll monitor them throughout the season to see if we've got new territories popping up. We also do get a lot of reports from the public on new nest sites, and so those reports are always welcome. Kyle's goal is always to find the new nest before it gets reported by the public. and I tell you, the public reports, oftentimes they beat them. There are times where he gets off of the survey and he's like, I got great news. And then it's a nest that was reported by someone while he was flying the survey. But this task, largely done by helicopters. We do follow up on the ground as needed. And that helicopter surveys are essential because in 2 days we can cover all of this territory in a helicopter, whereas on the ground it would take us a month and a half to visit everyone once. So these helicopters are a necessity for this part of the work. Data on that is largely giving us the number of breeding areas we have, able to keep a full census on the state. We're able to track productivity, which is that squiggly line, is how many young per occupied nest are being produced. You can see early on when we didn't have very many bald eagle breeding areas, productivity was all over the place. As we got a larger and larger population, that productivity really stabilized around 0.78 nestlings per occupied territory there in the 1990s, early 2000s. And then in the last decade to two, it's been more around 0.93. But that stabilized productivity tied with an ever-growing population is what we want to see. So I'm going to switch over to our banding and visual identification. This is where we go out and we get into the nest when the nestlings are 4.5 to 6 weeks of age. We do it at that age because they're big enough that they can thermoregulate, and they're small enough that they haven't figured out their eagles and they don't want to jump yet. And so that's a window where we can go in, we can grab the nestlings, put bands on them. They can survive having the adults off the nest for a couple hours, and we can get this band on them, this blue band here. And what that does is it gives us a lifetime of information on that individual and the bald eagles in our population. We know when breeding pairs are replaced through change in band status. It gives us a chance to detect immigration, bald eagles coming into Arizona if other places are banding, and immigration, bald eagles from Arizona that end up nesting in other states. It also gives us a lot of the demographics that we need to model our population and figure out whether or not it's a growing population, stable, and so forth. That's such as like age of first breeding, longevity, lifespan, tenure within a breeding area. All of this information we recently analyzed and published, and it finds that Arizona, with the management that we have in place, is seeing a 3% annual growth rate here in Arizona. But in order to ban these birds, we got to get to those nests. So it's either climbing a tree with spikes, or climbing the ropes, or on cliff nests. Typically, we'll get to the top of the cliff and we'll rappel down into the nest. Not all trees and not all cliffs it's possible to do that. Whether it's a dead branch that those guys are in or not, but this is where partners come in. We've got bucket trucks from APS or SRP that allows us to get in. This is a tribal fire department brought their fire ladder truck out to get us into this nest that was on a dead branch, and I am very grateful that the eagles are not using that pinnacle anymore. Because they used to float that ladder downriver on an inner tube, hike it to the top here, and lay it across. I'm pretty sure that's not the safest way to get across the gap. Yeah, I try to do things a little safer than they did back in the 80s. But ultimately, when we're able to get into the nest, we'll grab the birds, we'll secure them, we'll put them into this duffel bag here. It's got vented sides to them. And we'll bring it up to the top of the cliff or lower it down from the tree. And when I said secure, what we're doing is we're putting on these hoods on the birds. Those hoods shut off the basically the light. Their brains are like 2/3 optic nerves, so you put a hood on them and they just fall asleep. So it reduces the stress on the nestlings, and then we also put these booties on their feet that they're able to, that way if they're fussing at all, they don't accidentally talon themselves or their sibling. And then once we have them in hand, we put the bands on them, but we also go through and take a handful of the measurements, give them a health check, take their weight. Yes, the adults are yelling at us this whole time. So if you wanted to see the whole process other than the brief overview that I provided here, then you can find a lot of these videos of the work that we do on YouTube. Search bald eagle banding in Arizona, and you should be able to find them. Once we've got them banded, oftentimes we'll give them a little extra water. It's hot here in Arizona, so give them some water after their first taste of water, and then we'll put them back in the bag and get them back into the nest. We'll often spray them down also if it's a really hot day, so that it keeps them cool until the adults come and then can shade them. And then, yeah, put them back in the nest, and hopefully they're doing well. Sometimes they have lunch waiting for them. And then from the banding at that point, it's usually 5 years later when these guys are reaching breeding age and start breeding that we're able to read the band. So this adult here is zoomed in, this is 7P. We're able to read with a scope from a distance, And that 7P letter tells us exactly who it was, which year it was banded, where it came from, where it's nesting now, and so forth. So reading those bands is not always easy. 100% of the band reads that we used to get was all from these Questar scopes. In today's age, camera technology is such that I get a lot of bands from the public that they take from perch birds at a distance, and that's great. As long as they aren't going into the nests and flushing birds trying to get a band. But give you an idea of what that one part of that data is distance from their breeding area to the natal area, the nest where they were hatched. And you can see the great majority of bald eagles come back and nest within 200 kilometers of their natal site, which is less than 100 miles. You know, that's one of those things where it shows that Arizona is relatively isolated because it's pretty distant from central Arizona, where most of the eagles are, to major water sources in our surrounding states. So, great majority of birds here in Arizona, born in Arizona, return to Arizona to nest, which also drives a lot of our continued management here. Arizona has built our population to what it is from the work that we've done, maximizing productivity, whereas other states have built their populations by taking eagles where they're numerous in Alaska or Canada and hacking them out into their states. Arizona grew from our own small but isolated population. We do have some instances of emigration and emigration. We've got a bald eagle that nested in the White Mountains at Luna Lake that came from Texas. It was banded as a nestling from Texas. And then we've got some Arizona birds, some that are nesting and went from the Verde and Salt River confluence area to Nevada Bay, Colorado River, but it's on the Nevada side. And then we've got other birds, another bird recently that we had a tracker on, and it ultimately settled in Utah, and he's nesting in Utah. So we do have a little bit of immigration and emigration, but it's very minor. The other part of the modeling and so forth is from those band reads is typically the females are about 6 years of age before they nest for the first time. Males are typically 5 years of age on their first nesting attempts. Our youngest female that was successful in nesting was 4 years old, and our youngest male, is that one in the top right photo, was 3 years old. Nested at 3 years old and successfully pulled it off. And then the oldest female that we had was 30 years old by the time she disappeared from the breeding attempts, and then 32 years old for Luna. That was the male that came from Texas. And it tells us a bit about tenure. On average, bald eagles will nest for about 10 years. The longest is 26 years. And then that was tenure of an individual. But the unique pair is about 5 years. So what that means is typically bald eagles, they'll nest for life, but in their lifetime, they'll usually replace their mate at least once. So if their mate disappears that year and dies, they'll remain in the territory and they'll go out and find someone and bring it back. We had a nest watcher watching, side note, we had a nest watcher watching a breeding area up north, middle of nowhere. It's like a small little lake, nothing else around it. They eat prairie dogs and fish in the lake. And they were watching the birds, the male was perched, he just keeled over and died right in front of them. They were like, I don't know what the heck was going on. They had nestlings in the nest. The female continued to take care of the nestlings. Nestlings, got to 7, 8 years or weeks of age, and they said the female just took off, disappeared for 2-3 hours, and they're worried about her. And then they see her off in the distance circling and coming back, she brought a male back from wherever she found him. And she brought that male back, and they did their pair bonding while she took care of the nest. She wouldn't let him into the nest because there was a good chance he'd attack the nestlings. But yeah, she went out and found a replacement in no time. It was amazing. But the longest tenure pair bond that we have was 23 years. Some of the other added benefits of climbing into the nest, that was all the data that we get from it, but it gives us a chance to collect adult eggs. We can test those eggs for heavy metals and that sort of thing. It gives us a chance to find out if we're dealing with parasites in the nest and develop plans for dealing with those parasites. Gives us a chance to find and remove fishing line and hooks. Of the territories that we climb into nests, about 60% of those we've ran into fishing line and hooks that we've removed. And of any banding event, usually about 1 in 4 we're running into fishing line or and so forth. So that's something that's we're able to address and remove that threat ahead of time. There's some of the rescues that we've done tied to those things. And that fish with that big hook was removed from a nest before it caused a problem. All of these birds in these photos were treated and released and back into the wild. Also, because of the occurrence of the fishing line in nests, we did develop the monofilament recovery plant program in 2003, encouraging and reminding folks to pick up fishing line, remove it from the shorelines. That's something that anyone and everyone can help with. If you're out hiking around and you see fishing line, pick it up. It affects more than bald eagles, waterfowl, and other birds. Some birds will make their nests out of it, just asking for them and their nestlings to become entangled. The other thing, I'm getting off of the banding part, but another thing that we'll do as part of tagging birds is GPS tracking a small group of them. So this GPS tracking will go in when they're not 4.5 to 6 weeks of age, but when they're 9 weeks of age. At that point, their bones are fully grown, so they're adult size body-wise. They may be growing a little bit more muscle beyond then, but we can fit them with a transmitter, put them back into the nest, and then wait for them to fledge and be flying around. Once they're flying around, these transmitters that we're using these days are incredibly accurate, as well as able to collect data on a amazing frequency. This is an example of one that when it was set, every 15 minutes when it was perched, it would give us a location. But when it detected that it was flying, it would give us locations every 6 seconds. So you could track exactly where this bird was going and the habitats that he was using. We started doing this primarily on our eagles that are fledging in the urban landscapes because as pairs started moving into these urban landscapes and nestlings were coming from these urban landscapes, we started seeing more electrocutions. A lot of the areas along the riverways and the wildlands, a lot of the infrastructure was built to be eagle safe in those areas. Whereas in the city, the eagles aren't there. They built them to be raptor safe for like hawks and things. Then the eagles moved in and we needed to reassess. So we use this data here in order to identify those high use areas from our urban bald eagles and be able to identify those power lines and poles that need some sort of retrofitting. Oftentimes creating a perch above it is a big way to keep them from interacting with the live wires. And then also we'd set up the utilities work with Liberty Wildlife to set up some infrastructure in their flight pens, and then that way they could watch the bald eagles that were in rehab and see how they're landing, how they're interacting with these poles, so they could design fixes that would minimize electrocutions. All right, I'm going to switch over to golden eagle management now. I think I'm close to right on time, right? Perfect. So on top of all the bald eagle stuff that we do, and having more and more to do every year because our population is getting bigger, and we decided we didn't know enough about bald eagles. So the same crew that's doing the bald eagle work is also focused on this golden eagle work. Kyle McCarty, Jen Pressler, and David Draver are the three that do most of the flights and the surveys these days for golden eagles. Golden eagle is one of those that we didn't have a whole lot of information on. We needed to, I'm going to step back a minute. One of the reasons that we needed to work on golden eagles and figure out what's going on with them is when the bald eagle was delisted, they updated the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. They created a permitting system within that, and they did it for the bald eagle, but it's the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. And so now they had this system that they needed to implement on a species that they didn't know a whole lot about across its range. And so we knew we needed to get a handle on these guys when bald eagle delisting was coming up. A lot of those regulations were finalized in 2011, so keep that in mind as we go forward. So when we looked into what historically was known about the bald eagles, or golden eagles, we knew of 35 breeding areas back in 1979, 35 across the state. And those were from some ground-based conservative efforts trying to find territories. From 1980 to 2005, it was just opportunistic sightings and reports that were being recorded in our heritage data management system. And when we looked at all of that data, including the 79 data, we had 108 breeding areas identified across the state. In 2006, knowing that we had delisting on the horizon, we did a ground survey of golden eagles of those 85 sites that were like, yes, there's good data indicating there is a nest in the territory here. Those ground surveys of those 85 breeding areas yielded only 14 of them being occupied. We're like, oh no, we don't know of 100 of these. There's only pairs and a small few of them. And we also realized that ground-based surveys for golden eagles was not going to be the best way forward. So, with that increasing need for golden eagle information due to the permitting changes, concerns with potentially declining golden eagle populations, partly driven by increases in threats across the landscape. Golden eagles are very susceptible to collision with wind turbines. And the increased renewable energy development and proposals across Arizona, we knew we needed to do something for golden eagles in the state. So, in June of 2010, we reached out to our partners in bald eagle management and said, hey, can we get your help with golden eagles also? 19 of those members reached out and said, yes, we've got golden eagles on our territory, we've got some jurisdictional responsibility for that species also. And so we established the Southwestern Golden Eagle Management Committee based on the success we'd seen with balds. They met in June of 2010, and by January of 2011, we had funding secured and were able to hit the ground running and initiate surveys in Arizona. The first 2 years of surveys comprised of 230 hours in a helicopter. And what we were doing is we're surveying every cliff face that we had helicopter time to survey for across the state. And we're just looking for large eagle-sized nests. We did it during the breeding season so that if there was eagles there, we knew it was an occupied, verified site. During those 2 years, we found 67 new occupied golden eagle breeding areas in the state, and an additional 328 areas that had one or more large eagle-sized nests with unknown occupancy status. So at this point, we had a ton of nests, didn't know how many of them actually had eagles associated with them, so we transitioned over to an occupancy assessment where we visited those nest sites multiple times, spent another 230 hours in the air, and by doing that, we found 91 additionally new breeding areas during that period. And we found some additional big, large nest sites across the state that could potentially have golden eagles. At that point, we transitioned to, okay, we know where a lot of eagle nests are. We've got over 285 occupied territories across the state. And let's go back and visit a subset of those, figure out what our productivity rate is. So from 2015 to 2019, we surveyed a stratified sample of golden eagle breeding areas, spent about 100 hours a year, and each year visiting 40% of the known breeding areas in the state. 20% of those we visited every year, and then the other 20% would rotate into the other territories that we knew of and wanted to get productivity at. So at the end of that, we had 285 golden eagle breeding areas in Arizona, which is more than double of what we have for bald eagles. And we found 60 more breeding areas during this period. And our productivity results came out at 0.63 fledglings per occupied territory, 0.49, so about half of the successful nests, 0.45 successful nests per occupied territory, and then fledgling rate is 1.2 fledglings per successful nest. These numbers, although we've got more bald eagles in the state than goldens, the golden eagle productivity rates are significantly lower than the bald eagles. So even though those populations are different size, their annual output of nestlings and productivity is about the same, surprisingly. And then from 2020 to present, having that full statewide survey, we spent a lot of time commuting from selected site to selected site. So we started working into a rotational region where we survey all of this area one year, and then next year we'd survey all of this area, and then the next year we'd survey all of these nests, and then the next we'd hit southwestern Arizona in this part of the state. And so that gives us a chance for us to check up on those potential breeding areas in the region, check up on all the historic sites, and be able to grow our nest list. It's always been important for us to be able to grow that list and know about as many golden eagle territories as possible, because once I have that territory known, I can enter it into our system when projects within the department or other agencies are being sent in for environmental evaluation and compliance stuff. We're able to protect those sites because they're known. And so it's important that we get as many of those on the map as possible, considering 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we knew of 14 that had been recently occupied, and now we're up over 385 golden eagle territories in the state, which has been great, especially since the major wind energy areas in the state are this area here, this area here, and this area here. So knowing that those golden eagle territories are there on the landscape when a new project's proposed, I'm able to reach out, let them know how much golden eagle conflict they have, and we've had a lot of projects are shapes changes. Some territories, their golden eagles kept them from even pursuing further before they spent millions on it. It's been a great way to help avert conflicts with our golden eagle territories. And you can see there's still a lot of area where we can have growth in our population with habitat available for This is kind of shows that similar graph that we had with the history over time of knowledge of golden eagle territories. We saw one of these for bald eagles, but you can see this is where we started our surveys. This orange is historic breeding areas, meaning we knew about them but had no productivity information within 10 years on them. And these were the few known territories that we had. Since we started our nest search, this growth here is all from finding new territories, new breeding areas. But now that we continue to monitor these year after year, we'll be able to track if we've got continued growth in the population or not. And so this one, 15 years old, is opposed to the bald eagle side that's 35, 40 years old, if not longer. We're at least at a point where we've got a good baseline of information for golden eagles and able to help manage them throughout the state. And I've touched upon this all along the way, but bald and golden eagle, the data for both of these, bald and golden eagle data, I'm a big proponent of if you've got information, you've got data, use it. Let that guide your management, let that guide what you're doing. And it's been highly successful. We're able to work with our partners, APS and SRP, work with this data to build their operations and maintenance operations around breeding areas, seasons, and territories when there's overlap with their infrastructure. We work with the DoD and Luke Air Force Base to have avoidance zones around our bald eagle breeding areas when they're doing their training flights and so forth. It helps ensure that our department across all of our programs maintain compliance with the Eagle Act and we aren't causing impacts to balds or goldens if there's a juniper project or a habitat project going on and they don't know where the eagles are. We're able to make sure that they know that those are there. And our other partner agencies use that information similarly. Coordinate on, for instance, Prescott. We coordinate annually on their prescribed burn schedule and where they're burning and make sure that their activities aren't impacting active bald or golden eagle breeding areas. And for wind energy, as I mentioned earlier, it's been invaluable having the knowledge to begin with, to let them know when there's conflicts that may prevent the project from moving forward. It's invaluable having that information before millions have been expended trying to make a site work. Once they start spending millions, they want to get some turbines up to start recouping their money. I understand. I just don't want them to waste their money in areas that are going to cause problems for eagles or raptors in general. So laws protecting bald and golden eagles, there's still a plethora of laws out there. There we go. Out there, the Lacey Act, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. The real big one though is the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. That's the one that if it's eagles being involved, that's the one that the feds rely on mostly. But they also have CITES, and we've got some Arizona revised statutes protecting eagles. Was I right on time? So anyways, I hope you learned something, and I've got time for questions if you guys have them. Yeah?
Have they found any way to avert the eagles from going through a wind turbine?
The best way to avert it is to build it in areas that aren't eagle habitat, or to have observers out there that are able to call into the operations center and say, hey, turbine 232 needs shut down, incoming eagle, and then they can shut down the turbine. They also have some automated systems that will scan the skies, detect eagles, and turn off the systems that way. But those things cost money, and they don't do it obviously unless they really need to. Like if they built a mid-condor range, with them being a highly endangered species, I'm sure they'd use the identify type systems where if it's eagle, condor type, identifier the turbines would turn on for them. But there's not any great ways to teach the eagles not to fly in those areas.
Do the windmills affect the bald eagle and the golden eagle as much as the small birds?
They affect, it's typically golden eagles that they get hit more with the wind turbines, largely because their prey is, they hunt a lot of mammals. And so they'll focus on the mammal, be flying in and not pay attention to the rest. We don't have as many turbines in bald eagle habitat, so they're just don't have as much overlap.
The question is, they can't defend themselves any better than the small birds.
No, and bats either. Bats have a real hard time
The
with
other question I have, I talked to a nest watcher years ago down by the Fountain Valley, and he told me that the eagles that fledged down there stay, I know they come back to the breeding area, but he said they also stay pretty much in the state. Is that true?
Yeah, they pretty much will come back. Every once in a while, we have a bird that gets lost that we've tracked that never makes it back to Arizona. But the great majority of them,
Come back.
they'll migrate north, spend the hot summer months up there, and then they come back to
But
Arizona.
even on the northern migration, they stay in the states.
No, when they fly north, no, they'll go up to Oregon, Washington, Wyoming, Canada, and then they'll turn around and fly back. It takes them 4 to 7 days to make that trip. Yeah.
You talk about breeding areas, how does that equate to actual nests? Is it 1-to-1 or is it multiple nests per breeding area?
Yeah, some breeding areas, it's 1-to-1, but a lot of them that have been around, the eagles will build a nest, use it multiple years maybe, and then for whatever reason, they have a nest, pair replacement, and she doesn't like the new nest, and then they'll go build one elsewhere, and then you'll have 2 nests on the landscape that they may use either one in a given year.
Maybe only one pair.
But one pair with 1 to many nests in that territory, yeah. So we've got some areas that there may be 6, 7 different nests that they've used over the years that are still there, but it's only 1 pair using that spot.
How big is their territory?
Depends.
Okay.
Depends on the habitat. So the better habitat, they could have smaller territories. On the lower Salt and Verde River, we've got a pair about every 7 to 8 kilometers on the river. Defended territory is smaller, but on the regulated river systems, it's 1 pair per 23 kilometers of river. Yeah, question. Yeah.
Do the golden eagle and bald eagles territories overlap or they're nesting area?
Typically, no, because they'll attack each other. We have had times where golden eagles will fly by and they'll see a bald eagle nestling, and they'll just come in and grab it and throw it out of the nest. And then we have to go rescue it, get it rehabbed, stitched back up, and so forth. So yeah, they don't like overlap at all. Peregrine falcons are the same way. They do not like bald eagles in their territory, and bald eagles don't like them in their territory. So yeah.
For your rehabilitation, guys that go back out, do they kind of match the success of the wild ones specifics that don't have to go in and rehab?
Anecdotally, I'd say yes, because there's a lot of those that we see that are out on the landscape. The male that we have here at breeding at Watson Lake, he was one that got attacked at Leaks Lake. He was the breeder there and got attacked by an intruder and was on the ground, unflighted, went into rehab, and then we banded it and put a transmitter on it and released it. And 4 or 5 years later, we set up the territory there. So that red band that you see on him is because he was banded as an adult after he had rehabilitation. We've got a lot of other nestlings that have been saved that are now breeding in the state. Nothing makes me happier when I see a bird that I'm like, we rescued that guy, put a lot of effort into it, and then we read his band and realize that, okay, this is one that has a backstory, so.
So that adult, was he relocated or just released back?
I released him back in there at Lynx, but he quickly got his butt kicked again. He got pushed out of the area pretty quick. I got a question in the back here.
You mentioned having human nest watchers. Are you using trail cams at any locations to monitor nests instead of humans?
No, we don't have any trail cams up for those, for any of our nests. We did have a camera, nest cam, that was running online for people to watch, but that's ran into some issues and problems, and so they don't have that up right now. It's been down for about 1.5 years now, but we would like to get another live cam up somewhere in the state.
So the golden eagles and the bald eagles have significantly different diets. We're talking about the golden eagles eating mammals.
Yes, so golden eagles, they're largely eating rabbits or prairie dogs as their main food source. I'll also see snakes in their nests. I've seen ducks. That comprises most of what the golden eagles are what I'm finding in their nests when we collect prey remains. Whereas bald eagles, it's primarily fish and waterfowl. You will get the occasional skunk and rabbit, and we've got a few territories in Arizona that they rely heavily on prairie dogs also for the bald eagles. But usually it's waterfowl and fish that you find in bald eagle nests.
Do they do like carrion in there?
Carrion? Oh yeah, if they find a free meal somewhere, they're taking it.
How about osprey? Do the bald eagles kill the osprey typically?
I haven't seen them kill the osprey. They love to pester the osprey. They'll perch and wait for an osprey to come in and catch a fish, and then they'll chase that osprey until it drops the fish, and then they'll come down and catch the fish a lot of times they'll catch the fish midair and pirate it and take off with the fish. And then the osprey has to go back to hunting and find another fish. So there are territories in the state. Woods Canyon Lake is a good one where the adults just sit there and wait, and osprey come in. The osprey sometimes will catch 4 or 5 fish before the eagles let them fly off with it. You've got a question?
Yeah, outside of this behavior of these bald eagles returning to Arizona, are there any other differences you've observed compared to other states, maybe?
One thing that I didn't mention is bald eagles here in Arizona are a lot smaller than you'd see in the northern states. The Alaska bald eagles are the largest ones you find. The ones in Florida are a little bit smaller. That's not unique to bald eagles necessarily. There's a lot of species that got that variation from higher latitudes being larger bodied to smaller bodied as you get to lower latitudes.
Have they looked at the genetics of the population in comparison?
We know bald eagles in Arizona are genetically different from bald eagles in New York and Chesapeake Bay and Washington. What we don't have is samples from our neighboring states to know if there's a significant difference there or if it's just a geographic climal change in genetics over space. So that question's still out there. Not because we don't have the data, so our surrounding states don't have the eagle blood to test.
Regarding goldens, do you find depredation on larger prey? Like you found mountain goats or deer, small ponds?
Yeah, no,
I know they can go for some pretty big stuff occasionally.
That's a good point. Yeah, we will find supplementally, antelope legs, fawn legs, deer legs in nests from golden eagles. They will go for those, but when you climb into the nest, you're like, oh, they got lucky. They had one leg in there. It's not like you find a bunch of legs in a nest. But I might have 30 pounds of lucky rabbit's feet, in one nest. So. Yeah.
I'm interested in the Bald Eagle Protection Act. Does that drive
legislation against companies that are inadvertently harming eagles due to electrocution? I mean, it's not purposeful. I mean, does that have any teeth, like the wind turbine companies or power companies?
Yeah, so, Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act protects against a harm to eagles, whether it's injury or death, as well as any impact to productivity, so disturbance of nesting attempts, that sort of thing. However, kind of like with the Endangered Species Act, there are permits that they can have in place to where they can have those impacts. However, there's also stipulations tied to it that for mitigation, to minimize those as well as mitigate the offset. For golden eagles, that mitigation is like if they're gonna expect to kill a golden eagle, they have to have mitigation to replace that golden eagle at a ratio higher than one, it's like 1.2 or something. And then bald eagles is, they'll allow some, the population's growing and expanding, they'll allow some permitted take, as long as it doesn't come to a point where it's expected to impact the overall population. So it depends on the spot, but there's permits in place that the electric companies need to go for, wind companies need to go for, and so forth. And then depending on the specifics is what type of permit they need.
Are those permits say you gotta help pay for your order, the management?
Yeah, no, not necessarily. Not necessarily, the money doesn't necessarily come to me, but there has been wind farms that have killed eagles in multiple states and prosecuted by Fish and Wildlife Service. And in those cases, oftentimes the fines that they receive, that gets split up to the states that had the fatalities associated with it. So I have gotten funding that have helped with what I do through those means.
Are indigenous tribes still allowed to collect eagles?
Yes. Depending on the tribe is whether or not it's a practice that they culturally hold or not. Here in Arizona, the Hopi tribe is one that does use golden eagles for their ceremonial purposes.
So many a year, or what?
Yeah, there's a limit to how many they can have a year. They're permitted by Fish and Wildlife Service, and if they're doing any collecting off of Fish and Wildlife Service lands in the state of Arizona, there's another permit that they need to have from Arizona Game and Fish Department.
And they also get carcasses from wildlife, fish and wildlife?
Yes. Any eagle feather or eagle that we get, we send to the National Eagle Feather Repository, and from there, they're able to send the feathers and parts and everything back out as requested to any Native American tribe. Here in Arizona, we also have the non-eagle feather repository run by Liberty Wildlife. And so for anything that's non-eagle feathers, they're able to request those feathers. And then the department, for anything that's non-bird, whether it's antlers or bones from specific animals, the department has a non-bird wildlife repository that we make available for tribes here in Arizona. Maria?
So bald eagle nest watchers have a set of codes and shorthand that are used for data collection. And one of my favorites that I recall, I'm wondering, Tuck, can you tell us what the code WB stands for and what might fall into that category?
What was it?
WB.
Standing in the water bathing?
Oh, no. So I recall from the notebook, it was a weird behavior.
Oh.
That's always stuck with me, and it's very transferable to other life settings.
I've never been a nest watcher, so I did not memorize the codes. But yes, I think there was guidance, if you use that code, WB, you have to write out and explain what that was.
Not one that shows up very often.
No.
For the data collectors, are they doing ecology of eagles or mostly environmental?
I should have touched on that a little bit. So as far as the data collection that they're going with, they're collecting data on nest attendance and provisioning of the young, so feeding of the young, collecting information on habitat use, whether eagles are using the habitat throughout the breeding area, whether it's a hunting perch or preening or it's a shading spot, identifying those regularly used locations to make sure we don't build a bridge under, or a roadway underneath their habitat that's being used, or a campground. They're looking at the prey that they're foraging for, as well as the types of prey that are being brought into the nest. So that whole array of eagle behavior and so forth, monitoring them throughout the time. However, in addition to that, there's a lot of data that they're collecting on the human activity going on within the proximity of that bald eagle, either the nest site or a perched eagle, and in combination with the activity that's going on is the eagle's reaction to it. Whether it's not, whether they watched it, whether they're vocalizing, or if it caused them to flush or completely leave the area. So, yeah, it's that part where it's the human activity and the paired with the eagle's reaction that guides a lot of the on-the-ground management. Yeah.
Is there any data on eagle deaths from the death files, the lead, some of the bullets and so forth? I know condors, it's a fact, but bald eagles around White Mountains and so forth.
Yeah, no, bald eagles are susceptible to lead poisoning also. It's one of, for balds and golden eagles, it occurs throughout the state. Luckily for bald eagles, we've been able to grow the population as we have, even with that mortality source on the landscape. Whereas with condors, unfortunately, that's the one thing that they've got to tackle in that area, because without the voluntary move to non-lead ammunition within the condor range, that population has no chance. Still to this day, they range so widely between Arizona and Utah and back, and annually after the hunting season, they try to trap every condor. They test the blood on them. They're tracking most of them with GPS so they can tell if they stop moving, and then they'll go out and trap those birds, test them, and if their blood levels are too high, they'll bring them in and treat them, chelate them for the lead and so forth. And that activity is going to have to remain intensive as long as lead's on the landscape in condor range. Luckily, bald eagles, they eat a lot of live stuff too, and yeah, they can get themselves into trouble. Sometimes they're able to regurgitate it out in a pellet, so they just get a quick dose, but not enough to bring them down, but it does happen.
Did you see any HPAI effects on the eagle population?
We tested every bald eagle that was fresh enough and golden eagle that was fresh enough over the last 5 years for HPAI. We also swabbed in nestlings during banding, and none of those have come back positive yet. So that was great. I was worried about it, but it hasn't seemed to hit them heavily. Yeah, at least here in Arizona and other parts.
Midwest system, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about specifically the bald eagles that are here in the Prescott area, where they are, their nests, when trails are closed, how long they're closed, when they reopen? What's the activity in this community?
Yeah, here the main two nest sites that we've got is there at Lynx Lake and Watson Lake. We do have a lot of bald eagles that hang out at Goldfield Lake or Goldwater Lake. I believe those are the Lynx Lake, using both of those lakes. And so there at Lynx, the trail around the lake is open year-round. However, there's a trail that goes back away from the lake towards the nest site that is closed during the breeding season, because the eagles do react to people on that trail. And then the timeline on it is usually December through June. If the nest fails early, or if they fail and don't reclutch, we work with the Forest Service to open up those trails sooner. If there's no benefit to the eagles, no reason to close the trail. And then the other site there at Watson Lake. The trail goes relatively close to the nest site, but the eagles also built the nest when the Peavine Trail was being used. So with that, as long as people stay on the trail and don't go off of it towards the nest and get down below, those eagles are fine. So there's no closure there other than stay on the trail.
What about Del Rio Springs?
That one's a little further away, but yes, we've got a pair there. That's a pair that they're running out of tree space. But yeah, they've been seen here again this year. It's on private property, and so it's relatively well protected in that manner. And then there's some trucking that goes along there. They're aware of the nests and give me a call if there's anything going on there that's needs my attention. But yeah, that's another one. It's private land. Yeah.
With the new state park out there, are you working with them around the nest, or is the nest anywhere close to that?
I'm not sure which state park you're referring to.
It was a brand new state park that's been built there,
In that area?
right in that area, yeah.
Okay.
Right there.
I'll
And
reach out to
they
state
are
parks and
working,
find out.
they're.
They're working with our regional folks, I'm sure,
Yeah.
and they just haven't brought me in yet. But I know I really talked to them. Yeah.
What kind of tree species are around for them to nest in? I think you mentioned pine and cottonwood, so they're.
Most common is cottonwood trees and pines. We have had them nesting in sycamore. That's somewhat common. And then we've had very few in mesquite, really large mesquite, which is odd. Some of the urban nests are eucalyptus. And then we've got one that was found in 2020 nesting in a saguaro.
It is.
Sorry. So I know you mentioned they kind of leave the nests 45 days after they fledge. Are the parents supporting them as they're figuring their shit out, like figuring stuff, or are they kind of?
Yeah, during those 45 days when they are flighted, but in the breeding area, the adults are still providing them food and provisioning them. I don't know if it's they want to or not, but usually what happens is the adults go hunting, and now these guys aren't tied to the nest. They're following around screaming at them until they get some of it, so. Yes?
Is there a golden eagle population in this area, Prescott area?
There is. We've got golden eagles all around Prescott. One difference with golden eagles is they're going to be in the remotest areas, hardest to get to areas in this part, well, any part of the state. So even though they're there, it's and there's probably more of them than bald eagles. It's just hard to see them. You're pretty lucky if you encounter a golden eagle, just because they're so secretive. They avoid human activity, and so you just don't see them nearly as often. Do you have any other stumps for me? You can stump me in something else. Yeah.
Are you working with others? I know you said there's not many states that have the support to do this kind of research, but what other states have you all been able to work with or collaborate?
Largely with the bald eagles, since it's somewhat isolated population, we've just been working with agencies and so forth within Arizona. Golden eagles, there's a little bit more coordination between the surrounding states. We've had some coordination meetings with California in the past, Nevada, and Utah, and so forth. And there's some more teams that are showing up here, just getting started here in a couple of weeks, where the western states are going to have a lot more coordination on standards and so forth with golden eagle work across the western U.S. So That's a work in progress.
Does the state have a law against poisoning prairie dog colonies? And the ranchers in the back of the town used to do that and loading feed on them, I was just wondering.
Yeah, that's not an advised pathway forward with gold, especially if it's something that will transfer on over to eagles. There have been ranchers that have gotten in significant amount of trouble for poisoning dead lambs and so forth. Their purpose is trying to manage the coyote population, but then they ended up with 20 dead bald eagles on their property, and then they ended up with massive fines and jail time and so forth. So, there are things that they can do legally to eradicate or minimize the amount of prairie dogs on their landscape, and do that legally. But I'm always on the side of prairie dogs are good food for my birds.